Today's event on the state of the press was proposed by the Press Freedom Committee of this club as its contribution to the series of events that the club has been hosting in relation to the handover 20th anniversary. As a press club, of course, it seemed important and relevant to assess how the press has done in the last 20 years under the principle of one country, two systems, and a basic law that guarantees in its Article 27 that Hong Kong residents shall have freedom of speech, of the press, and of publication, etc. So on the one hand, we all know the bad news. Hong Kong's ranking in the World Press Freedom Index by RSF, Reporters Sans Frontières, has plunged more than 50 places in just 15 years. In 2014, Hong Kong Journalists Association said that Hong Kong was going excuse me, through its darkest period ever. We'll see where we are now. And of course, we witnessed major changes of ownership, of editorial teams in several major media. But at the same time, we've seen new media platforms dedicated to independent and neutral news coverage appear. And actually, just a few weeks ago, when we handed out the Human Rights Press Awards with HKGA and Amnesty International, it was quite a good news to see that some of these new media won prizes. So, to discuss the state of the press in Hong Kong, the FCC is delighted to welcome Daisy Lee, who is the founder and chief editor of Citizen News. But Daisy Lee has a fascinating history with the press in Hong Kong and Taiwan. She was with Ming Pao for 13 years. And then I was going to say 20 years, but she corrected me. She said 18 and a half years with Apple Daily. And she contributed to several very innovative initiatives that I hope she will tell us more about, including a free media newspaper for the next group. And she was also the chairperson of the Hong Kong Journalists Association from 91 to 93. But of course, we want to hear about the latest thing she started with 9 other founders, which is called Citizen News. Shirley Yam is also a very respected columnist who writes mainly on education at the moment for the South China Morning Post. Business, sorry. And she's with us today as her capacity of, as vice chairperson of the HKGA, the Hong Kong Journalists Association. And special thanks to Shirley, with whom we discussed the project of this event. And then Chip Tsao, who is a multi-faceted, multi-talented journalist, who is, I guess, preceded by his reputation and followed by tens or hundreds of thousands of followers and readers. Broadcaster, columnist, former political editor of Eastern Express. Chip also served as deputy editor of the Ming Pao and as a producer with the BBC Chinese service. So thank you very much to the three of you for joining us. And I'd like to start with a very simple question, which is actually just a number, 2 numbers to each of you. I'd like to gauge your view on the press freedom. If you were going to give it a mark, 0 to 10, in 1997, and then now, what would be these numbers? Shirley, do you want to start?
Well, my answer can be easily guessed. If the rating in 1997 is 8, what we're having now is 2 to 3. Why 2 to 3? Because we still have free access to internet. No journalist has been murdered. None of us has been jailed. So let's stick with 2 to 3. And perhaps I can explain a bit on why I would say it's, there's a strong deterioration in that. Let's forget all the so-called judgment call, why the news are handled like that. There's a case I like to talk about.
If you don't mind, Charlie, we'll go into the case. I'd like to compare your numbers with Daisy and Chips.
Well, I think my marking is more or less similar. We haven't discussed about that, but more or less similar with Shelley. So my marking for 97 would be 7 or 8, and now it's 3 to 4. 7 or 8 in 1997, not 10, because there's still a lot of draconian provisions in our ordinance. I remember that in 1997, with the Patent Administration, the HKJA and FCC has been vigorously lobbying patent to get rid of all these draconian law, but he said it's okay to keep it there. So now we got a 3 to 4, because all these draconian laws is still there. Now the government is using it to the extreme.
Okay, and Chip, what is your view?
Yes, I think I would give it 8 in 1997, about 2.5 now, but I like to give another rating. I would say 9.5 in 1967. Why 1967? Because of the riots. Most Chinese newspapers were more free to report on the accurate number of the dead bodies floating from mainland China to Hong Kong as a result of the Cultural Revolutionary combat. Right? And then Chinese press was more free to speak out for the interests of Hong Kong against the riots. So there was a bit of a mini comparison.
Yeah, very interesting. So now, Shirley, give us, and I'll ask each of you before we start debating among yourself and with the floor, some of the important events or incidents or episodes that in your view have marked these last 2 decades.
The main complaint from JA is about the loss in diversity. I guess many of you have heard about the headline news of the Causeway Bay bookseller. Why don't we look into what happened daily in the newsroom? There is a case called UGL. I suppose many of you will have aware of that. That is in 2014, October. An Australian newspaper reported at 3 p.m. Hong Kong time that our chief executive have accepted 50 million Hong Kong dollar from an Australian company without disclosing that to the government. So since that was reported at 3 p.m., we would assume that most newspapers will have sufficient time to cover that. And given it involved the top officials of Hong Kong, that certainly become a front page story. This is not the case. The day after the first reporting of the scandal by the Australian paper, of the 18 newspapers, only 4 put it on the front page. The rest all buried the story in a city page or deep inside. And the size of the coverage, the worst that I've seen. That is the coverage for the scandal of a top official in Hong Kong. So do we call that a judgment call? And then the natural question will be, why is this happening? Why is this similar pattern, which is only 4 out of 18 newspapers will handle a top scandal like that, and the similar pattern repeating in story on the Panama paper? Instead of talking about state leaders' families' BVI company, they either do not report that, or it's about Mr. Putin. Why? So for that, I guess it's not hard to guess or to have an understanding of what's going on in the newsroom.
I think the most disturbing incident, I would say that in recent years, the frontline journalists are facing increasing hostility from actually both sides, from the blue camp or from the yellow camp. I think journalists are always not welcomed by a lot of people, but not violence. But in recent years, I noticed that there's an increasing violence against frontline journalists. Actually, an increasing number of them get injured. And there's no prosecution from the government whatsoever. Maybe Shelley can correct me about that. And also, one very disturbing scene I would recall is a police officer, policeman, when they go into the camp to do a rehearse about how to handle the riots. When they go inside that campus, a lot of reporters shooting from outside, far, far away. And one police officer doing this gesture to all these journalists shooting the picture. Of course, this is, what's that means? Everybody's doing their own job. The policemen doing their job and the journalists doing their job. But that gesture is very intimidating. And that actually happened in reality when the journalists covering protests in the past, that the police will give certain respect to the journalists. But now increasingly, they look at the journalists and they look at it as part of the protester. And that's something very disturbing.
Do you want to highlight one or two episodes?
Yeah. Well, 3 milestone cases, as far as I can remember. Number one, I think it was the year of 2005, correct me if I'm wrong. The cable TV sent a reporter to Taiwan to do an interview, personal interview with the then Vice President Liu Xiulian. And then the cable TV managed to broadcast that interview. And immediately it received very hostile and intimidating warnings from the Chinese institutions in Hong Kong, branding the cable TV of spreading the poisonous thoughts of Taiwan independence. Although I watched the interview, it was quite balanced. Right? And since then, nobody would raise any idea of daring to go to Taiwan and interview perhaps Tsai Ing-wen or Li Tenghui or a retired Li Tenghui or whatever, no more. The second case, of course, is the UGL incident with the chief executive circulating legal letters, banning fair commentaries and etc., so that most editors or newspaper tycoons feel very scared to pursue. And the third case is what has been happening since the past 2 weeks. This very big nuclear bomb of this billionaire on exile in America, Guo Wengui. He has been doing more than a few dozens of monologues, right, on the YouTube, accusing top Beijing leaders of something very scandalous. Now, I don't know whether the Apple Daily, perhaps the Apple Daily has been the only one which has reported on it scantily, but not any other, not a single other newspapers.
But is it reliable? That's the issue.
It
that
doesn't
most
matter.
newspaper will.
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, it's controversial, but it is a fact that a big man like this has been making such big allegations. And if not, okay, forget about that. What about the Voice of America? The Voice of America drama. Someone was being interviewed live, and then it was cut short. What happened underneath? What happened behind? Right? I mean, you could avoid the name Guo Wengui, right? Because what he has been saying largely is groundless, right? But, well, I mean, what about the Voice of America? Why there was such an abrupt ending of a live interview? Promised to be more than 3 hours, but cut short at the time of an hour and 40 minutes. I mean, there were a lot of fishes in the pond behind, but not a single Chinese newspaper, as far as I know, ever dared to dig deep into it.
Right. Before we open to the floor, and I hear from your marking and from these comments, and I think the list of episodes is quite long, actually. that the picture is rather grim. Do we have any reason to rejoice or to be hopeful? As I mentioned, we handed out a few prizes to new media, and maybe Daisy, it would be very interesting to hear more about the initiatives you have in terms of thinking out of the box and providing a different offer in terms of journalism and covering the news. I guess with all the problems that you have as well.
Well, I think the thing that we can rejoice is that the Citizen News, we start without any major investor. We still survive after 5 months. And I can promise you that we will be still survive 1 year. The next year. Today, the next year.
Can you just tell us why you decided to start this with Kevin Lau and 8 others?
It's Citizen News, although the name in English is Citizen News, but we are not really citizen reporters. We are all, I would say, veteran journalists, the 10 of us. We started the platform because we all close to our retirement age. We can choose to retire, or we can still continue our commercial, job. But somehow we decided to do something because we look at the scene is so deteriorating. We thought maybe we can do something that, if we can do something good, and we can inspire the younger journalists. So we start the platform, and quite boldly that we don't have a major investor. We only have 1 to 2 million seed money, and then we start on the 1st of January, and then we raise fund. We're doing crowdfunding right now, so if you can help out, most welcome. We're doing crowdfunding right now, and we are getting subscribers. So we hope that we can, we have only 10 paid staff, and the 3 senior staff, including I myself, we are doing full-time job, getting part-time pay. But for the younger journalists, we pay market price to them because this is their job. So this is something that we try out whether we can still have a little platform that dare to voice out the things that Chip Chow just mentioned, that we dare to trace after C.Y. Leung. We literally trace after him on the UGL case because we have filed question to his office for 6 times, and he's basically looked at us as transparent, so he didn't answer us on the case. So we literally sent our reporters to the airport before he left to Beijing, and we cornered him, and he answered 3 questions from us because the TV is rolling. So embarrassingly smile, but he answered the questions. So we hope that we can do something good. But anyway, that's something, you're asking if there's anything that we can rejoice. I hope that's one of them.
And what about the challenges in terms of economy? Because you're crowdfunding, but you only have a few hundreds of subscribers. Tell us about your business model a little bit, because it's so different than the usual.
This is a question that if I can have an answer. I think everybody is asking the question, what is the business model? Honestly, we don't have a very sound business model. We are crowdfunding. Our target is 3 million, and we have 10 days left. We managed to only waste about 2 million. So we
$3 million, not 3 million readers, right?
$2 million, okay. So we still need to waste, in 10 days' time, we still need to waste $1 million before, we have to reach the target. So it's not easy. So I have no sound business model right now. But we know that we have to somehow, it's not a charitable thing that we can base on it forever. So we somehow have to think of something. So subscription model, fundraising, and then probably we would do some intelligence report and then selling it to potential clients. So we would try out a number of things to hopefully that we can manage to still see you to next year.
Chip, can you comment on the new media that you've seen yourself? You post a lot on Facebook.
Well, yes. I mean, unfortunately, there's very little value for money on most mainstream media, especially Chinese newspaper, with which you have to pay $7 or $8 for a copy. I mean, to be honest, there isn't much to read and to see from these newspapers anymore. Some argue that it is resulted from self-censorship. But if there is a vacuum left by self-censorship in these mainstream media, fortunately that vacuum is being filled up by some marginalized and very crude media journalism based in America, organized, edited, and run by some very strange Chinese dissidents or political enemies of President Xi Jinping who are on exile and who are more than happy to spread out, release scandals and gossips and information to demonize their political enemies in Beijing. There's a very colorful playground of gossips and scandals in the Chinese internet media based in America. And I wouldn't say they are all serious form of journalism. However, in the past 10 years, if you have got a Sherlock Holmes bean-counting mind of rationality, you could put all these information and scandals together and do your own picture, make up your own picture of analysis, provided that if you have time. And you could get easily addicted to these gossips and scandals because names of big Chinese officials have been thrown out first on these internets. And strangely, after a few months, they all became facts. They were being they were locked up, given long prison sentences. So there's a bizarre campaign of news release, organized or manipulated by different Chinese political cliques. And these are very rife on Chinese internet. So I tend to read more of these than any mainstream Chinese media in Hong Kong now.
Okay, and Shirley, the Hong Kong Journalists Association, what is their take on the new media? I mean, I'm thinking of Hong Kong Free Press, Inithium, HKO1, Citizen News. These are new places to do good journalism. What is the reading of HKGA on this?
Well, these are all certainly very encouraging signs. And that's why the JA has been fighting with its limited resources for its full access to government events. And we even bring the government to court to fight for the accreditations of internet media.
Because it may be worth reminding that at the moment in Hong Kong, the electronic media are not, I mean,
yeah, in Hong Kong, the digital-only media are not considered media. Their journalists are not considered journalists. So Daisy, who has spent 30 years, more than 30 years in this industry, was classified as non-journalist the moment she jumped to Citizen News. And a funny way out for Daisy will be to hook up with a pink magazine, maybe Playboy or Penthouse. Then she would get an accreditation. I mean, this is not a joke. It actually happened during the chief executive elections. One of the online media hooked up with an investment magazine. So they gained access to the chief executive election press center. This is how ridiculous the whole system has been. And there is no explanations whatsoever. So Hong Kong being the, I guess, a dozen of countries in the world that does not recognize online journalists as journalists. So this is one of the issues that new media are facing. But a more fundamental problem is not just to the new media, but media generally, is the loss of trust, of public trust in journalists. I was in a school talk during a few weeks after the Mongkok uprising or riot, whatever you name it. I was explaining to some secondary school students, why shouldn't you hit a journalist? And the young men and women were saying that they deserve it. There is a reason why they got beaten up. So I invite one of them, please tell me. So one of the young boy in his, I guess it's 16 something, he was saying that because they are not being fair, so they deserve to be beaten up. So this is they are the young generations. So this is the lack of trust that we are facing, other than the pressure from Beijing.
Yeah, but you still said that there is positive news in the fact that the new one, you didn't comment much on the new platforms, apart from the fact that they are incapacitated, they are stopped by the government. You still think that there is quality coverage that comes out from these new news outlets?
Yeah, diversity is always good. No matter where you are, you're on the left or you're on the right, whether you're bad or you're poor, diversity is always welcomed by Journalists Union.
Great. It's time to open the floor. If you have questions, Chip, did you want to add something?
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, in the past 10 years, I think the world sees a rise of populism of journalism. To explain partially what your adventure, because everyone could use their iPhone and then do a bit of recording of anything that happens in the street. The latest classic case being, I think, the Sun in Britain even relays it. An angry Chinese husband crashed into his room, finding his own wife in bed with her adulterer, and then he beat him up, kicked his head, and the newsy bit is the wife, all naked, right, and lie down in a posture that looks protective to the adulterer. And the whole film clip is about, 40 seconds long or whatever. I mean, is that a fact? Yes, it is a fact. Is that dramatic?
But it's not
Yes.
journalism, right?
It isn't. But the young generation of news consumers have been mistaking this kind of fragmented bits of visions and words as the new age form or internet age journalism. It is just like seeing fine art in the West, from Renaissance to modernism, and now it gets into cubism, right? So unfortunately, it's this kind of fragmentation of journalism that is becoming a norm in the world. And Hong Kong is only one of the jigsaw pieces of the whole picture, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're saying that, yeah,
This
we're not the
reason-
only one to have some
This
issues.
gruesome
definitely.
live donkey being pushed into a cage of tigers, that has been
I don't
the
know.
latest live tiger in a zoo near Shanghai in China.
Really? Okay. So, first question here from Victor Mallet.
Hi, Victor Mallet, Financial Times. I want to ask you about, the role of the media in holding Hong Kong's leaders and Hong Kong's business leaders as well to account. I was very intrigued by this case of Xiao Jianhua, which again was reported first by the foreign media, I think initially by the Chinese media in the US, and then by my paper and by other media, and then eventually, rather belatedly, by the South China Morning Post and other media here. So it's not just, why was it not reported by the local media, who have dozens of reporters available to do that reporting, but why did the media, including in the opinion columns, not do more to hold to account the leadership of Hong Kong and the candidates for the election, which was just coming up then, the chief executive election? It seems to me that this should have been hugely embarrassing. 400 meters from here, Chinese agents at the dead of night kidnap one of China's rich men from the Four Seasons Hotel, and they take him away, and Hong Kong's government, none of the candidates, they didn't say anything. They didn't say, yeah, this is a fundamental erosion of our autonomy. What was going on there? Why was the media not able to get a better response or a more, vigorous response from the leaders of Hong Kong?
Charlie, maybe?
This is a terrible example of what I mean by loss of diversity. So there are only two extremes of media. The one on the left or right anyway, thinking that, this is far too sensitive. Let's not report that. The other one on that side was saying, so this is a fight among the baddies. So why should we be bothered? So everyone was trying to interpret what does this whole episode mean in China's big politics. And based on that, they make the decisions not to get involved. If it's the bookseller, I mean, let's compare that with the bookseller case. Yeah, the one on the right-hand side would see it as a major crusader things that they have to do. Absolutely.
I would say it's due to part of the rising sense of alienation of the young generation for Hong Kong people to whatever happens in China. It happens to a Chinese, a mysterious sibling, right? A rich billionaire who has been kidnapped by the Chinese, right? It is how it is defined. So it is a fight between a few big brothers of a gigantic mafia organization, which has got nothing to do with us. I mean, I don't very much agree with this sense of narrow-mindedness. But unfortunately, it is the kind of mentality that the most young generation in Hong Kong is under. But what happened to the Causeway Bay bookshop man, Mr. Lam? He's a Hong Konger. And this Xiao Jianhua, this eccentric Chinese rich sibling, right? He wasn't. Although there's a lot of rich materials there. I mean, Hong Kong journalists could approach any staff in Four Seasons, the manager or whatever, trying to dig out unnamed sources of information, unnamed sources. But they fail to realize that what happened in China has got something to do as a butterfly effect with Hong Kong. Right? So yeah. Unfortunately, this sense of alienation and isolation, I would say, is also harmful to Hong Kong's journalism. You give it up. The market give up the right to know, partially.
I must say that when I tried to cover that story, I was given mixed reaction, and some people told me, well, as long as it's dirty linen being washed among Chinese, it has always happened, and in the past, we were never saying so much because it's almost a bit like a mafia thing. The Causeway Bay booksellers was a completely different case because it was Hong Kong people, but the case we are discussing now was more in line with the previous type of kidnapping and so that's what I was told at the time.
But I still think the issue is the accountability of the Hong Kong government, regardless of how good or bad the guy is. The point is that their autonomy has fundamentally been held in contempt. And isn't that an issue? Regardless of how nice the guy is or how wicked he is, it's not the point. The point is that Hong Kong's government's autonomy has openly been defied and broken and ignored. That seems to me an issue that the Hong Kong media should care about, regardless of whether the guy is a nice bookseller or an evil businessman. It doesn't really matter. The point is that the Chinese government is able to do things that are fundamentally in breach of Hong Kong's autonomy. And to me, that would be a big issue in the media, but I was surprised to see that nobody made much of it.
I think a few questions were put to high-ranking SAR governments, and they made the most boring cliches of answers of evasiveness. But I think it was briefly
yes, it was briefly commented upon, but
it wasn't pursued.
That relates to another big issue that we haven't touched on yet, which is the ownership, right? The change of ownership. And of course, when we heard that Jack Ma was taking over the South China Morning Post, and I think for the first 2 weeks we had about 10 stories out of 15 newspapers. Everyone was very concerned. How important is this change of ownership in the Hong Kong landscape? Is it something you can tell us a bit, HKGA first?
I'm a staff of Morning Post. That's it.
Sorry about
I
that.
have to declare
You're
my
here.
conflict of interest.
Yes, it's true, sorry about that.
But I guess I can quote what they say in a town hall meeting to the staff. That is, the role, it's very telling on, not on the Post, but media in the eyes of China. The role of Morning Post, according to the boss, is to tell China's story to the world. Our target audience are the English-speaking audience. Full stop. So it's not the other way round. It's not to tell the world, not to tell China, the world. And this is very important in the sense of, let's look, I mean, China have spent billions of dollars to pitch its soft power over the past decade. It is not going very well. So we need someone, or they need someone, who speak the language. When I say language, not just the grammar, but they actually tell the story that a foreigner can understand. So I can see Morning Post is happily taking up this role to explain China's story. And I won't be surprised we are going to see more media playing this role in different language.
Thank you. And actually, we invited Gary, Liu, or Tammy Tam, but none of them were in town today. So next question. We have two questions here, please. Maybe Stephen and then Ed.
The question
Please introduce yourself, please, Stephen.
Oh, I'm Steve Vines. The question that all of you have addressed, but I'd like you perhaps to talk about a bit more, is this whole thing about whether it is actually self-censorship or whether it's censorship. In other words, are people from the liaison office coming into newspapers, telling them what to write, what they can't write? Are owners going to the liaison office or indeed to their bosses in Beijing to be briefed on what can and can't be written? I mean, what evidence do you have of how much is second guessing as to what the bosses want and how much is actually direct orders?
It's both. I think when we talk about self-censorship in 1997, it's more inclined to self-censorship. But right now, it's censorship and self-censorship together. I think that my former, my next media group, I don't think that there's any Chinese official or Hong Kong official dare to censor them. But one chief editor from a newspaper, a mainstream newspaper, told me in person that he get call every day from Taiwan, from the Chinese liaison office, telling her what to report or the line to take for tomorrow's story. That's happened.
These chief editors and administrators at a higher level of bureaucracy have been subject to a very strong and prolonged campaign of what you call united front. It is a very delicate art of persuasion. It goes something like this. It could be dated back to more than 20 years, right? Before, yes. Questions are being asked to media owners and chief editors. Are you Chinese? Yes, you are. Do you want China to be a prosperous and free country, free, eventually? Yes, I do. But do you agree China is somehow different from Western countries like America and Britain, and which have developed their own form of democracy in two or 300 years. Whereas in our case, we have managed to open to the world for barely 30 years. So don't you agree that things have to be done step by step? And we, the Chinese Communist Party, are as concerned about the happiness of the Chinese people, like you intellectuals. But we are in a difficult position because we've got 1.3 billion mouths to feed.
You sound like you could work for the China Liaison Office.
No.
You do the job very
You
well.
are given a long list of custom questionnaires, at any airport, right? So you have to tick, right? Or yes. I mean, when you are asked questions like this, these officials sound immaculately logical, right? There is not a single question you could refute. It is all yes and yes and yes. Then good. We are sharing some common ground now.
So it's like
We appreciate
soft persuasion.
Yes,
That
I mean it is soft persuasion, but some would argue that this is the kind of things that the Anglo-American tobacco company has been doing to some anti-smoking groups, but it's different in nature. It is called United Front because you are positioned as an enemy, but only an enemy of the secondary tier. And it could date back to a famous saying by Chairman Mao in the 1930s. We must unite, right, all the secondary tier's enemies against the first tier of enemies, right?
yeah.
Maybe I can add a bit to Steve's say, in an open society like Hong Kong, which is more powerful, censorship or self-censorship? When you can induce enough terror among the journalists, then self-censorship is far more powerful because it's simply impossible for us in Hong Kong to come up or to draft a long list of don'ts. Let the journalists judge what Beijing do not want to see. That is far more effective.
Just before we take Ed's question, Daisy, I'd like to make sure I understood properly. Who was the person who is receiving a daily call from the liaison office?
One of the chief editor, I can't name the name, but I can say
Because
that
of the recording.
one of the specific requests from the liaison officer that the liaison office is that, oh, you should do a story against Jimmy Lai.
That's a suggestion.
That's why she told me, because I was working for Jimmy Lai at that time.
Ed.
Maybe first of all, I'd like to ask Shirley. You write for the business section, so it's relatively safe in that space. And when I was talking to Wang Xiangwei, the former chief editor at SCMP, that was during the time of Occupy. Of course, he was very diplomatic and all that. And I don't know whether Tam, I believe, is the chief editor-in-chief right now. Have things changed quite a bit in terms of the opinion section? Well, it seems like my professor from Canada, when he arrived a few weeks ago, and he says, hey, how come SCMP is like China Daily? The opinion part, really lost its flavor, so to speak. But with that said, does anyone have to be like Citizens News? Like you don't really have to put up a name, but just use the title Citizens News without naming the columnists who write it. And how do people survive? And as Chip, that Joseph Lin's column was sacked 2 years ago, same thing as mine from Hong Kong UJ and whatnot. Do columnists have to be very witty, satirical in order to survive like you?
Well, I've been writing in a way that, thanks to my education in Britain in English literature, I try to learn the art of understatements. But the few cases you've just cited, yes, they were direct results of phone calls received by the chief editor and newspaper tycoons, right? And then they were sacked. Brilliant columnists and commentators, Professor Lin, an academic, who just doesn't bash China because he dislikes China. He's got a lot of evidence and analysis based on on rational thinking, and he's not allowed, right? And well, these are all results of phone calls, as far as I know. But they could find the la la land of the internet journalism, fortunately, right? So it is eventually the choice by the consumers. These newspapers who have sacked you or Professor Lin are charging $7 or $8 every day per copy. It is very expensive. And now consumers have the choice. I mean, I could get onto Citizen News, which is free, and still enjoy reading your column and a couple of others. But eventually, it would make columnists suffer because they won't get high pay because of Citizen News and other internet news are losing money.
We'll squeeze one last question, and I will spare Shirley from replying because she's here as HKGA, and she's not really here to defend such an amount.
No, but I can tell. Okay, personally, I've been doing a column in Morning Post for more than 10 years now. I was never stopped. Okay, but according to a report in the JA, that the Morning Post did change its columnist policy, which is a central columnist policy, in 2014 after the Occupy movement. From then onwards, journalists are asked to submit their topic to be pre-approved. At the same time, the editors can suggest topic to the columnists. The explanation is we want diversity.
Okay, we give ourselves 2 more minutes for the last question, and then we'll have to close. Sorry, there is one there.
My name is Peter Berthold. I'm a member of the club. The word diversity I have heard many times, and I'm a reader of many newspapers, and I prefer, of course, diversity. But I give you an example. The honorable members here of the committee, or of the speakers, it seems they are all representing more or less one side of the story. I'm missing somebody from the Chinese press or somebody who can talk against Mr. Chip. You had some very good arguments. I think there was a good example where you were saying the answers are basically predicted and so on. But I would like to have a little bit more diversity here in the panel. You were also touching on the mistrust of the young people or generally the public. I think this mistrust is because nowadays everybody writes editorials. He thinks he can write an opinion, and it's very difficult to really differentiate the facts from an opinion for readers, normal readers. And we hear so much about fake news these days, so it is difficult for us readers to come to a fair opinion.
Thank you for your comment. We went through a very long list, actually, with Shirley, of people we could invite or not, but, and we, of course, had this. I personally think we already have quite a bit of a variety here, but yes, thank you for the comment. I'm afraid we have to close now. Thank you very much for attending. Please give a big round of applause for our guests. And thank you all for joining and your insights.